Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. On the first graphic is of fire danger, and it's expanded a little more up here from what it was yesterday due to the hot, dry conditions they're experiencing there, with temperatures approaching 90 degrees in some areas this afternoon at mid-afternoon. And also here along the Tanana Valley on down north side there of the Alaska Range, Delta Junction, on down to Tok and Northway. That's kind of expanded also from what we had yesterday. And as well as in the Copper River Basin here, in the valleys with some extreme fire danger as well thrown in there. Otherwise, pretty light in the fire danger elsewhere around the state, except here, Copper River Basin, northward to the eastern Brooks Range area. And there are no warnings, watches, or advisories for weather or rivers or streams anywhere in the state for tonight, tomorrow, and probably the day following. Otherwise, there's a high pressure zone here aloft over the, roughly around the northern panhandle, and that's ridging in from the southeast across the central and eastern interior areas, and actually bulging westward here today toward Norton Sound. But there's also this frontal boundary that's slowly, actually a couple of bands, one band right through here, very weak trough. That's what's bringing some moisture up into the southern Cook Inlet area. Really, most of the rainfall back down toward Kodiak, where they picked up 0.25 of an inch during the 12-hour period at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And then the main front right through here, and then a little bit of a break behind that. As you can see, really weakening here as it slides up toward the Alaska Peninsula area. And then we've got some moisture sliding northeastward here along the Arctic coast, or actually the northwest part of the state, as well as the Arctic coast. And rainfall amounts up in this area are very light, just a few hundredths of an inch, and that's about it, anywhere from 1 to 5 hundredths at the most falling with that area of clouds. Back to the northwest, so another surge coming down, which is actually back associated with this trough here. Here's the surge of moisture brought the light precipitation really light and scattered here along the central western Arctic coast. And some isolated thunderstorms also developing here in the, we're a little more convective over the inland areas, but nothing widespread and just isolated at best. Also some isolated showers trying to develop over the Denali Park area, but nothing widespread expected. Sunny and hot here through the interior. Copper River Basin temperatures well into the 80s today. And south central Alaska, though, cooler under the influence of the marine layer, especially around Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, finally reaching the lower 70s this afternoon once the low clouds burned off. And this trough with the light rain, Kodiak, again, the state airport picked up about 1/4 of an inch of precipitation. And southeast flow around the main low center down south of the Alaska Peninsula. That also brought 1/4 of an inch precipitation to Chignik. And then by contrast, Cold Bay had 0.05 of an inch of rain there. So much lighter. Definitely this band has the heavier precipitation, which really isn't that heavy at all. And then out over the Bering Sea, band of moisture kind of oriented along the Aleutians, brought periods of rain, fog, and drizzle there, but amounts are quite light. And also some moisture into the eastern Aleutian areas, where Unalaska picked up about 0.08 of an inch today. And then Tin City, though, had about 1/10 of an inch, so a little bit more in the way of precipitation there. Otherwise, again, much lighter amounts up to the northeast under that area cloud cover. And Gulf of Alaska covered in low clouds, areas of fog that come right up to the coastline here and even into Dixon Entrance. But the interior area is seeing lots of sunshine, temperatures in the high 60s to mid 70s, with Petersburg at 3 p.m. reaching 79 degrees this afternoon. And also over the eastern interior areas, 83 degrees at, let's see, it was Northway, tied the record high for today of 83 degrees. Delta Junction also 83. Their record for today is 84. So probably be some records set over the eastern interior here, especially with temperatures rising up toward 90. Like Beaver had 89, so they were very close to that. And Salsa 88 there, just east of Fairbanks, with temperatures mostly in the mid-80s at mid-afternoon through the greater Fairbanks area, but then cooling off back to the west as it will be tonight here. It'll stay dry, just isolated showers, variable clouds through the central interior, mostly clear off to the east and quite mild. Temperatures in some areas won't drop below 60. And then low clouds and fog, maybe some drizzle here right along the southeast coast. That'll tend to move inland over some of the inside water areas, but nothing too extensive, hopefully. And the initial band of moisture right through here, that'll keep a chance of light rain going along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula area. And some of that will slip possibly into southern Cook Inlet, maybe Seldovia, maybe a few sprinkles in Homer, but nothing heavy, and that'll kind of enhance as it reaches the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range here. Continued damp for Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, not so much for King Salmon and Egegik, but chance of rain across the entire area here of light rain out across the Kuskokwim Delta to Nunivak Island, and then a couple of weak low centers here that'll keep it damp and unsettled over the Alaska Peninsula as well as the Fox Islands. And weak high pressure developing out over the western Bering Sea. No storminess at all. That's kind of got this band of moisture stuck in place there. Maybe dropping south of the central Aleutians, but low clouds, fog, definitely IFR conditions will be the rule out in the Bering Sea as well as through the Bering Strait and on up to the western Arctic coast. And the outlook for Monday, again, that trough finally kicks eastward. Very weak trough, though, with isolated thunderstorms developing in some shower activity here with it. Moisture on the eastern Arctic coast, that'll be the best chance as this high center moving eastward finally shoves that thing eastward as well. Maybe some clearing back to the west. And then with this system, risk of a thunderstorm, just a risk that it may occur here over the southwest mountains. Otherwise, areas of light rain possible anywhere in the green shaded areas. And again, a little farther north along the Kenai Peninsula, maybe Seward, but not quite reaching Prince William Sound, just be mostly cloudy there with variable clouds, possibly as far east as Yakutat. Could be mostly sunny though. Another sunny hot day here, Copper River Basin, central Tanana Valley, 40-mile country back into the 80s. And maybe a little cooler over portions of the upper Yukon Valley, but in other words, may not reach the 90s, see the lower 90s you're seeing today, or upper 80s. And then the outlook for Tuesday, a little bit cooler, but not too bad. Actually, high pressure aloft holding up here over the central and eastern interior part of the state as it buckles and weakens down to the south. So that's going to continue to allow a little more moisture, so a little more cloudiness over the next couple of days over southern Alaska areas, which is south of the Alaska Range, with the rainfall, though, confined to western Prince William Sound, south coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Again, the usual pattern here in southeast flow at the surface and aloft, the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Chance of rain with this slow moving frontal boundary across Bristol Bay stays again damp and unsettled for the Alaska Peninsula to the Fox Islands. Maybe a little breezier. North winds could kick up to maybe gusts 25 miles an hour, especially for Nikolsky there, possibly Dutch Harbor. That's about it as far as anything significant goes. Low clouds, fog will still dominate the Bering Sea along with light winds and a couple of impulses of moisture there. Could bring some light rain. But that'll be out west there in the western Aleutians and probably nothing you'll even notice. Arctic coast looks like it'll be drying out. North slope definitely drying out. Sunshine possible up there, while temperatures to warm a little bit. And looking at the temperature map here, the first one, lows for tomorrow morning, near 60 up over the northeast interior, upper 50s out to the west toward Tanana to Galena, and also Ambler, 56 the low for Kotzebue, lower 40s Arctic coast, 50s over the north slope, and mid-50s here, south central Alaska, lower 50s, Bristol Bay, upper 40s in the Aleutians, and 55 to 60, we'll say, for the southeast coast. And then highs tomorrow back into the 70s to maybe near 80 across portions of the Panhandle. A little cooler, but not that bad, 73 forecast high there at, I believe that's Sitka. Back into the lower 80s, Copper River Basin, and again 85 to 90 here over the eastern interior areas with mid-80s for the Fairbanks area, slowly cooling back to the mid-70s, and then upper 60s for the coastal areas of the Seward Peninsula. Lower 50s western Arctic coast, or all along the Arctic coast, will be in the 50s, 70s maybe there for the north slope into the Brooks Range, and lower 70s to Sitna Valley into the Kenai Peninsula with 50s and 60s, cooler conditions with the clouds and moisture down southern Cook Inlet across Kodiak Island, otherwise 50s for the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And the highs back, or for the lows Tuesday morning, lower 60s, and then back into the 80s for Tuesday afternoon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic showing IFR, central western Arctic coast through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island. Of course, covering just about all of the Bering Sea and Aleutians along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island, marginal for Shelikof Strait. Marginal VFR here across the southwest to IFR over the southwest mountains. And lowering conditions creeping northward or expanding northward here, mainly along the western Alaska Range. IFR creeping up the coast to the Kenai Peninsula there on the east side, but not quite getting into Prince William Sound. IFR right off the southeast coast. Tomorrow afternoon, showing that pretty much continuing, maybe retreating back a little bit, but the marginal hanging tough there right along the coastline. VFR over the inland areas, and VFR interior Alaska, but marginal VFR eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, with the IFR farther to the south, Kodiak Island, and marginal for Bristol Bay. IFR still holds here over the eastern central Bering, improves a little bit out here to the west, but we've got that band right through the Bering Strait, catching Kivalina with some marginal VFR, but the IFR probably Point Hope definitely in Cape Lisburne, and then looking really good there for most of the Arctic coast and North Slope in the afternoon. For the Tuesday morning, marginal VFR, possible IFR right along the immediate coastline there on the Beaufort Sea, and also to the west here. No change, Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait areas into St. Lawrence Island with IFR, again, eastern Bering Sea here, but not reaching the southwest coast until you get to about Cape Newnham. Marginal VFR for Bristol Bay. No change for the western Alaska Range, and also for Kodiak Island, no change for the Gulf of Alaska, and no change for the Panhandle. For Tuesday afternoon, not much change occurring either. Staying VFR though over the inside waters. VFR North Gulf Coast. Now we've got marginal VFR slipped on up into western Prince William Sound. And again, southern Kenai Peninsula staying IFR, Barren Islands, east side of Kodiak Island here and Fognak Island. With VFR Arctic Coast North Slope, Brooks Range, all the way over to the Seward Peninsula. Some marginal VFR sneaking into the Norton Sound area, and VFR trying to get in toward, looks like Savunga, but Gamble's still in the soup, and IFR all the way down across the Pribilofs, but kind of faltering as it tries to reach the Aleutians, except out west. So moving on to passes, Anatuvik and Atigun, both VFR again tomorrow, as well as Lake Clark and Merrill, but eastern approaches, look for some marginal VFR. I'd say pretty likely, especially for the southern pass there, Lake Clark. And then for rainy, I don't think any marginal, you'll see an increase in the clouds, but it'll stay VFR for the pass throughout the day. Windy, VFR. Isabel, same forecast. And Mintesta, VFR. Tanita, VFR. Portage, occasionally marginal tomorrow, which means occasionally VFR, hopefully, at least part of the time. And for Chilkoot and White, another VFR day. Freezing levels. High pressure ridge shifting eastward, weakening slowly. By tomorrow morning, not too bad. Still 12,000 feet here over the Panhandle up into the eastern interior, 10,000 feet all the way over there toward Kotzebue Bay. And then a little bit cooler, 8,000 foot cold pool here over the southeast Bering, west of Bristol Bay to about the Alaska Peninsula, warming back up to 14,000 feet for the western Aleutians. Icing could be some considerable moderate rime here above about 10,000 feet. So all the icing areas I have highlighted here are up there above about 10,000 feet and even above 12,000 feet out here in the Aleutians. And again, but the heaviest icing and best chance for running into any will be here. But again, you got to get up to 10,000 feet. And then for looking at the 18,000 foot wind flow chart here, upper level high center holding here over the northern Panhandle and dominating all of the eastern interior as well as the northern interior, just about all the way out to the Bering Sea. Southeast flow picking up to 50 knots. That indicates a change is going to get escorted in with it here. And then after tomorrow, this ridge just sort of weakens and begins to fade away as the upper level low here grabs up the whole scene over southern Alaska. But the central areas will stay nice into the middle of the week. And for 9,000 feet southeast, 25 knots, Kodiak Island, southwest interior, much lighter, 5 to 15 over the northeast, northwest 20 to 30 out over the Aleutians. And light winds for the Panhandle at 3,000 feet, 25 to 35. There's that area of where the gradient's tightest and those southeast winds the strongest. Northwest out over the Aleutians, turbulence, occasional moderate chop, Kodiak Island up across Kamishak Bay and the southern Alaska Range.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not to a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat
squished
it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It is just
moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make 1 lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah. You could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
Takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles out. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
The same speed.
Right. The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot,
I see.
and it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture. You can replay that and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called. These are stationary in appearance, and they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures. If you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is we're up on the very top of the planet. And for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book, but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit, which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth, getting down toward International Space Station elevation. And they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this. And the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail. The kind of detail, because you're close in.
Very high resolution.
You couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. Okay. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by, and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits. Each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right, okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years. Amazing stuff.
It's a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on Dehne and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of change from yesterday. Actually, the biggest change occurring here along the far Russian coast here, far eastern Russian coast on the north side there. That's where most of the melting's been occurring. Little change up here along the main ice edge. A little is expected through this entire area over the next 4 or 5 days. We're seeing thawing occurring here, of course, with this zone, and then that's actually extending to a lesser extent up to the northwest of that area. And coastal water forecasts, southeast coast here, south coast, northwest 15 to 20, seas 5 feet tomorrow, 10 to 15 on the north coast. Inside water is variable at 10. Lynn Canal, though, northern Lynn Canal south at 15. Outlook for Tuesday, northwest 15, Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait. Same thing here along the south coast. And lighter, more variable winds for the north coast, and seas running 4 to 5 feet. Southeast 20 knots there for the eastern North Gulf Coast, light northeasterlies Prince William Sound, small craft advisories. Western North Gulf Coast, across the Barren Islands, into Kamishak Bay, as high as 30 knots with 8-foot seas. Southern Cook Inlet, northeast at 20, northern Cook Inlet at about 15. And for Tuesday, small craft advisories now south of the Forelands or Southern Cook Inlet, right on down into Kamishak Bay, easterlies 30 knots, hold there for the Barren Islands, or small craft advisories, and also hold here for the western North Gulf Coast, east 20 there for the east side, Prince William Sound. Winds stay light out of the northeast with 2-foot seas. Kodiak Island, east-southeast 25 tomorrow, seas 6 to 7 feet. Sitkinak to Castle Cape, much lighter, south at 15, even lighter yet. Light and variable winds tomorrow for the Alaska Peninsula, 3 to 5-foot seas, but small craft advisories out for Bristol Bay for winds out of the east at 25 knots. Outlook for Tuesday, east 20 for Bristol Bay and northeast 15 here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. South side, we've got about 10 knots up to Castle Cape, and then Castle Cape to Sitkinak, 15. Pick it up a little bit there, 5-foot seas. Small craft advisories still out for Shelikof Strait, northeast 25, 7-foot seas. Fox Islands, west-northwest, 15 to 20 knots tomorrow. Seas running 4 to 6 feet or so. Central Aleutians, light northwest, 15 out to about Kiska. Then they turn southwest to 20. And then for Tuesday, west 15 there for the far western Aleutians. Pretty light here from Kiska Island in toward Adak at about 10 knots, although picking up around Adak, Atka about 20 out of the northwest, and northwest at 20 knots also for the Fox Islands, with seas around 5 to 7 feet. Southwest coast tomorrow, south of Nunivak Island, we're looking at winds to be out of the northeast at around 20 knots with seas running 4 feet. Pribilofs and areas on up to St. Matthew Island, north winds at about 15, seas only 4 feet. 15 knots also on the north side of Nunivak Island. Pretty light northeast winds, or variable there for St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound. No more than 10 knots, seas no more than 2 to 3 feet. And for Tuesday, 10-knot winds continue there for Norton Sound in the forecast with slight seas. 15 St. Lawrence Island, all the way down to Nunivak Island out of the north, 3 to 4 foot seas. Northeast at 15 coming out of the Kuskokwim Bay area there. North 20 for the Pribilofs, and that's where the strongest winds will be found for these zones on Tuesday. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, winds mostly northwest at 10, turning a little more northerly here as you get over toward Demarcation Point. Swinging around to the south at 10 on the west side, and then peaking up to about 15 knots here from Cape Lisburne down to Point Hope and those areas. So lighter winds than those gusts to 45 miles an hour Cape Lisburne you saw today, and south 10 for the Chukchi Sea. Outlook for Tuesday. Now we got small craft advisories definitely coming into the picture here. 20 knots though for the Chukchi Sea, but from Cape Thompson all the way up to the central coast, small craft advisories out, and brisk wind advisories for south-southwesterlies 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 8 feet in open areas, and south to southeast 10 to 15 for the eastern coastline. For tonight, this weak front, there's a lot of clouds and areas of light precipitation in the form of drizzle, light rain, fog, and any combination of the three that'll extend right up towards southern Cook Inlet, maybe the southern Alaska Range. Otherwise, fair, maybe some evening thunderstorms back here in the northwest. Weak trough keeps IFR in the central western Arctic coast, and IFR builds along the panhandle, but mostly stays off the coast with VFR over the inland areas. And for Monday, sunny and hot again in the interior, temperatures 85 to 90, maybe in the Fairbanks area, 40-mile country, panhandle, temperatures approach 80, wet over Kodiak Island, and a little change in the pattern for Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.